いただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
So, before I explain my rather strange title, Audiovisual Remappings and fcremap, Future Creatures of Prodigal Progeny, I hope that will become clear today. Just want to mention a few of my current research interests, which this presentation will reflect. So first of all, over the past couple of years, been interested in how one can translate or transcribe still or moving images into sound or musical material in a way that gets away from just sort of surface resemblances or associations, and this being done by the composer or by performers being confronted with graphic or animated scores. An interest in the gray zone between electronically generated sound and instrumental sound. How this distinction can be minimized. Too often, this world of music generated by instruments and sounds coming from speakers are seen as quite separate from each other. Finding ways to integrate them a bit. Doing so partially through physicalizing electronic sound, or a more fancy term, corporealizing sound, using transducers and other devices. But also the physicality of performance, not just as as the reality, but as a mode of expression. And for both the performer and for the listener/viewer, cross-modal perception, how visual and audio can be integrated, the associations that exist between them, and sometimes the conflicts, the tensions created between what's happening in the video and what's happening in the audio. So we'll start with Future Creatures. Now, this is a piece that I think many of you know already. I presented this in 2015 at the Salamanca Festival, but just to remind, or for those who have not seen it. So this was a collaborative piece I made with Pang Eunjung, a Korean animation artist. So it began as a set of animations published in a book, then set in motion as a video. And for this project, Eunjung remixed this video piece into a short and a long version. And we chose the shorter version for this particular piece. And I produced the audio in response. So just play, this is in 3 parts, and so I'll just play a bit from the first part. the FC Remap series. In 2014, percussionist Eric Durr attended a screening of Future Creatures, shown in San Diego. And afterwards, he asked me for a piece that would somehow deal with the audio and visual elements of Future Creatures for percussion and perhaps for electronics. So the challenge here was how to take a two-dimensional medium and adapt it for for instruments and electronics. How to go from this video piece, fixed piece, to a live performance. In response, I wrote the piece FC Remap Perc for him. FC for Future Creatures, Remap for remapping, and Perc for percussion. Followed by 5 other pieces, which operated according to a similar principle, different means of adapting the video piece for different solo instrument and ensemble configurations. So this is the series, and as you see, for rather different sets of instruments, all involving live electronics in some way, and some further associations can be made here, further trends and contrasts as well. So some pieces involve animated and graphic notation, and the performers respond with structured improvisation. A few are composed in discrete movements, reflecting the individual sections, 3 individual sections of Future Creatures. Others are continuous. 2 pieces are exactly the same duration as Future Creatures, about 9.5 minutes. All pieces except 2 make use of transducers on the instruments. The exceptions here are for alto flute and violin, and one for clarinet, and it just was not practical to make use of transducers in those cases. Within the cycle, there are derivation chains, there are some connections among pieces. So the percussion piece is directly connected to Holma, which is for 2 kotos and electronics, and FC Remap piano is taking one movement which is scored for microtonally tuned zither, and then translating or adapting this movement for mapping it onto kotos and the inside of the piano. More indirectly connected to FC Remap Perc, Remap alto flute violin, as I suggests. And FC Remap DB, the last piece to be composed, is for ensemble, makes use of animated scores. And so this is influenced by there's an improviser version of FC Remap Perc, Remap alto flute violin, and also by FCL Remap, which is for clarinet and electronics using graphic scores. Now, in the paper, I discuss all of the pieces of FC Remap in some degree of detail, but in the interest of time, we'll just look a bit more closely at FC Remap Perc, the first piece to be composed, and FC Remap DB, the last piece. So as I mentioned before, this is for solo percussion and electronics, and it's in 3 movements, and each movement has a different instrumentation and corresponds to the duration of the respective segment of Future Creatures. The electronics consist of some excerpts from the audio of Future Creatures, and I also use the program PhotoSounder to transform some still images from Future Creatures into audio via spectral analysis, converting color values to spectral values. There's live processing of the instruments, and these influence so sound levels of the audio, as well as supplying filter frequencies and bandwidths for bandpass filters on the electronics, and in the third movement, extent of pitch shifting that occurs. Now, the audio is projected through tactile transducers, which are placed on a few different instruments, so a resonating metal sheet in the first movement, a snare drum, and on the zither itself. And this was a means of blurring the boundary between electronically generated sound and sound produced by the instruments. Here you see the scodatura of on the zither that I was using. And that scodatura is based on spectral analysis of some of the image to sound processing that I did in PhotoSounder. So here's one of the images, the still images from future creatures inside of PhotoSounder. So you see time and frequency. Here's just one page from the first movement of fcremap. So using reasonably conventional notations, this is for tam-tam electronics. But in the interest of synchronization with the electronics, it's written in temporal notation. Just a few excerpts. So here's a bit from the first movement for tam-tam and resonating instruments and electronics. Sleep, which is for bowed cymbals, tambourine, and resonating snare drum. And then from Home, which is for microtonally tuned zither and resonating snare drum, metal sheets, and transducers placed on the zither itself. So that was the first stage of the first installment in this series. Now in December of 2016, the ensemble Decibel had a residency in the Tokyo Wonder Site, and a few of us were involved in a collaboration with them, writing pieces that made use of an iPad app that they had developed called the Score Player. And the Score Player allows for the scrolling or animation of graphic scores and the synchronization of scrolling scores across different iPads through a networking function built into the software, and also allows for the synchronization of electronics to the scrolling score. So it eliminates the need for turning pages or for using stopwatches or other distractions. And so for this piece, I made use of this functionality of the score player. The piece is scored for the ensemble, but it's any member of the flute family or clarinet family, violin, viola, or cello, or all of these, or any number. Electronics and animated notation. Similar to fcremap, electronics are projected through transducers, which are in this case attached to a small kalimba, sort of West African thumb piano, and also it could be a snare drum or a tambourine. And as was indicated in the diagram previously, there's a connection to fcremap, so the percussion part is derived from the solo percussion piece. So this piece is divided into 6 sections, and for each of these sections, each performer has a unique still image from Future Creatures. And I was using 6 basic contours. So these are derived from the sort of structure of the morphology of car alarm sounds in a repertoire of the car alarm repertoire. There are 6 sounds, and these created sort of what Michael Koenig would call tendency masks, sort of filters applied to each of the images. And this was used for generating the electronics, but also acted as a kind of, as a score for the performers. And I asked the performers, there's a bit of improvisation involved here, to assign 2 unique playing techniques or physical parameters on their instrument to 2 visual parameters. So this could be color value or line thickness, or object density, or whatever. And then to apply a unique articulation type to each section. So isolated points, collections of points, pulses, or just continuous tones, continuous sounds. So here's just a spectrogram of the 6 car alarm sounds, which are familiar. And here are just examples from the score. So this is for the flute, clarinet, violin, or cello. And here's the percussion part, which was written in more conventional notation, largely due to the fact that for this instrumentation, a sort of frequency time mapping really makes sense. Now, during this residency, there were 3 performances, and given the fact that there's several decisions to be made by the performers, each performance is rather different from the other. So I'll just give you 2 quite contrasting examples of the same section of the piece. So here's one. this case, particularly in the flute and in the clarinet, there's greater use of extended techniques, and it's more punctual. So I was taking quite a literal approach here in terms of connecting the video piece with the ensemble piece. Now that by the middle of next month, all of the pieces for fcremap will have been recorded, performed and recorded. So a release will be coming out by the end of this year or beginning of next year on the label New Focus Recordings. Keep you informed about that. And that's about it. So any questions?
ありがとうございました。25分になってしまいましたが、一つ二つ質問をいただければと思います。
You use the sound transducers to how to say, play some instrument by a computer, right?
Yes.
Is there any? What is your intention to use that kind of transducers along with the human playing?
So the idea was to move from the paradigm of electronic sound coming from speakers separate from the ensemble. Instruments, the electronics often tend to dominate in these cases, and integrating the electronics a bit more with the ensemble. And so using them to activate instruments and to better blend with the ensemble. So the division, this boundary between the electronic domain and the mechanical domain, if you will, is limited. One of the advantages actually to this was when recording, for example, the percussion piece, often it's difficult to make a convincing recording of live electronics. But since everything was coming from the instruments, it actually made a fairly convincing recording just using microphones, picking up both electronically generated and performer generated sound.
ありがとうございます。27分になってしまったんです。その時のその演奏家とね、オーディエンスの関係性とかどうなるのかちょっと後で聞いてみたいと思うんですけれども、とりあえずまた休憩時間などとご質問ご本人に直接いただければと思います。どうもありがとうございます。Thank you very much.